All right, let's get right into it. For pretty much all of history, we've treated money like a social construct, right? It only works because we all agree it does. But what if there's another way? What if we could tie our money to something real, something grounded in physical reality? That's what we're exploring today, a new kind of ledger, a system that's not based on the judgment of a committee, but on the unchangeable laws of physics. This brings us to the huge question posed by our source material. Who should be in charge of the rules? Should a small group of people get to decide when to create more money, tweak interest rates, and choose who gets credit? Or should the rules be set in stone, totally transparent, and governed by something no one can just change on a whim, something like physical law? When you look back at history, the answer really depends on who's left holding the bag when that committee gets it wrong. To really understand why this question is so critical, we need to zoom in on a fundamental problem baked into our current systems. See, when new money gets created, it doesn't just magically appear in everyone's bank account all at once. Nope, there is a massive advantage to being first in line.
This whole phenomenon actually has a name. It's called the Cantillon effect, and people have been talking about it since the 1700s. It's a pretty simple but powerful idea. The people closest to the money printer, big banks, governments, major corporations, they get to spend that new money at today's prices long before the inflation it causes has rippled through the rest of the economy.
So let's just walk through how this actually plays out. Step 1, the central authorities decide to create new money. Step 2, it flows directly to the insiders. Step 3, they take that new cash and immediately start buying up assets, stocks, real estate, you name it, which drives their prices way up. Now, by the time that money finally trickles down to everyone else, that's step 4. Inflation has already kicked in. And the end result? Well, that's step 5. Everyday wage earners and people who've been saving diligently are stuck with higher costs for everything, but their wealth hasn't grown. Their purchasing power has been quietly stolen. So, if these systems run by committees create such big distortions, what's the alternative? Well, the source material suggests a pretty radical idea. What if you could back money with the most honest, universal, and measurable thing we have? What if you could back it with energy itself? Now, believe it or not, this isn't a brand new concept. Way back in the 1930s, a group called the technocracy movement actually proposed an energy certificate, where every dollar, so to speak, would represent a certain amount of energy. The logic was solid, but the execution had a fatal flaw. Why? Because you still needed a central authority to go around measure all the energy being used and then issue the certificates. You just ended up swapping one committee for another. The real breakthrough would be figuring out how to get rid of that gatekeeper entirely. And that, right there, brings us to the mechanism that was invented to solve this exact problem. A way to issue new money that absolutely requires the irreversible spending of energy, but without any central party needed to sign off on it. It's called proof of work. So what on earth is proof of work? Well, at its core, it's a system where you can't just create new money out of thin air. You have to do real, verifiable work. You can think of it like a giant global lottery. Participants, who we call miners, are all competing to solve a really hard math problem. The first one to find the solution gets to add the next page of transactions to the ledger. And for their effort, they're rewarded with newly created monetary units. The work is the real-world energy their computers spent trying to win that race. It's provable, it's expensive, and you just can't fake it. Now, it's really helpful to compare this to another system you've probably heard of, proof of stake. The difference in their design is absolutely critical. With proof of work, the security of the network comes from outside the system. It's anchored in the real-world, competitive global market for energy. But in proof of stake, the security comes from inside the system. It's based on large coin holders locking up their capital. So, one ties security to physical work, the other ties it to how much you already own. Of course, the second you start talking about using energy to create money, one question always comes up, and it's a totally fair one. Isn't all this just a colossal waste of electricity? Well, the argument from the source is that proof-of-work mining is economically incentivized to find the absolute cheapest power on the planet. And what's the cheapest power? It's the energy nobody else wants or can even get to. We're talking about stranded hydropower from a remote dam, or solar and wind that's being generated when there's zero demand. Or, and this is a big one, natural gas at oil fields that's literally just being burned off into the atmosphere. In a way, mining acts like a buyer of last resort, turning what was pure waste into a valuable asset, and it can even help make our power grids more stable.
So what's the ultimate payoff for all this energy being spent? It's not just for show. It serves a really profound purpose. It creates a historical record, a ledger, that is incredibly difficult to cheat or tamper with.
The key insight here is that this system makes changing the ledger, revising history, economically tied to physical costs. Think about that for a second. To fraudulently change a transaction from the past, you wouldn't just be hacking some software. You would have to redo all the computational work and literally respend all the real-world energy that the entire global network has spent since that transaction happened. You'd be fighting against the laws of physics, and the cost of doing that is just astronomical.
And this really makes the difference in incentives crystal clear. On one side, you've got these discretionary systems where the people in charge can actually benefit from things like inflation. Their incentives can get seriously misaligned with the public's. But on the other side, you have a system based on rules. The only incentive for participants is to secure the network according to those rules, because that's how they earn their reward. There's no backroom committee that can just change the rules or decide who gets what.
So, where does all this lead? What's the end game here? It's not just about inventing a new kind of money. It's about laying the foundation for an entirely different kind of economy.
Now, it's really important to be clear about this. This new ledger isn't a magic wand. It's not going to create some kind of utopia. It is simply a different set of rules. As technology, AI, and robotics get better and better, they're going to make a lot of things incredibly cheap to produce. This system is designed to provide a stable, predictable foundation that works with that future of abundance instead of fighting against it.
This all boils down to an incredibly simple and powerful idea from the source material. When you remove human discretion from the system and you tie it directly to the flow of energy, you end up with something that acts more like a law of nature. As the author puts it, energy flows more honestly. Truth sticks. The truth of the ledger, who owns what, becomes incredibly hard to change. It sticks. And ultimately, this new kind of system presents us with a potential future where basic survival is no longer the main economic problem we have to solve. It creates a new kind of freedom, and that leaves us with perhaps the most important question of all. What are we going to do with it?